point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 635th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Nancy Wolf, who again is not here. She's on the road for her regular job and couldn't be here today. But hopefully she will be back next week. This show is a news aggregation show for energy and climate change. News in the last week. I picked the three most interesting examples of news from my blog every day. My blog is geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. You can go there and use the calendar to find the article that you want, if you want to read the article that I read a synopsis of. Or you can go to a tiny URL website, which will take you to the development page for this particular show. This show is doing news from July 31st through the 6th of August. July 31st being a Thursday, 6th of August being a Wednesday. And I guess that's all for that. I want to start with an article about wasps. Let me put this up. Specifically about a wasp's nest. This comes from ABC News, and by the way, that wasp nest is not the one in question, and in fact, I don't even know whether the one in question is of that type. Wasps build many kinds of nests, and the wasp nest in question might not be anything like that. But the article comes from ABC News, and the title of the article is Radioactive Wasp Nest Found at Site Where U.S. Once Made Nuclear Bombs. Workers at a site in South Carolina that once made key parts for nuclear bombs and is to make nuclear fuel in the future found a radioactive wasp nest. The nest at the Savannah River site is near tanks where liquid nuclear waste is stored. Officials said there was no danger. There was no other information. There was no information about what kind of wasp nest it is. There was no information about what species of wasp it was. There was nothing, just that it was a wasp's nest near a tank of radioactive liquid. There was no indication of what isotopes were found or elements were found. This could be tritium, it could be something more serious. Since this news item came out, another news item came out that said that 3 more radioactive nests were found at the site, but we still don't have some information that I think really should be shared. And I find this disturbing. This same kind of lack of information could apply anywhere that nuclear material is used, including nuclear power plants. And that is why I have included it in this show. I'm going to go on to the next place. Here we have a village in Alaska. Every time I look at that village, I think that it's a village in Montenegro or someplace like that, but it's Alaska. This is from Clean Technica. The title is NREL, which is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, technical support empowers local governments and tribes to boost energy efficiency and cut costs. That's the title. From the capital cities in the east to Alaskan villages in the west, NREL is advancing community-driven energy solutions from coast to coast through the US DOE Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. It is nice to know that something is still working at NREL, and I hope it continues to work in the future. That is really possibly all I've got to say about that. There are a lot of things involved in these community-driven energy solutions, and but we'll see how that continues in the future. Okay, we have another item here, which is about cars. This also from Clean Technica. A new Nissan Ariya for $31,000, question mark. After hearing a person, a progressive Democrat, by the way, say that EVs cost $187,000, implying that fossil fuels aren't all that bad, we checked. In less than 5 minutes, we found a new Nissan Ariya at a Nissan dealer near where the person lived. With no government incentives to take into account, that's no federal incentives taken into account, the price was $31,000. As I recall, this particular car was in Colorado, and it did get a state incentive. There are a lot of states that provide vehicle incentives. The point of this, the point of the article, is that even people who are progressive, even people who support fossil fuels, don't really understand the numbers all that well in many cases. And this person would have been able to buy a car powered by fossil fuels without any regrets, because the person simply believed that that electric vehicles were too expensive. But clearly in this particular case, the vehicle is not too expensive. I mean, this thing is only a sixth of the price that the person thought was the price of a new electric car. And this brings up another matter too, by the way. We have a tendency to think that the cost of a new electric car, or the cost of solar power from electricity from a solar power plant, or whatever, is static. We learned 8 years ago that solar power was 7 cents per kilowatt hour. So still today, we think of it as 7 cents per kilowatt hour. The same thing is true of fossil fuels. We learn that fossil fuels cost a certain amount, and it's easier to accept the idea that the cost of fossil fuels is going up because we're accustomed to inflation. Nevertheless, these costs change. And this, I think, is the reason why Donald Trump thinks that wind power is the highest cost source of electricity, or solar power, because he's accustomed to figures that are years old, and is unaware of the fact that the cost of solar power is declining by 13.5% per year. And so, we have to, if we're going to believe that something costs something, we should look at the current prices for those things. Okay, we're up to Friday, August 1st, and we have a picture of global greening. This is also from Clean Technica. The title of the article is DOE. This is the United States Department of Energy. Decrees that we can never have too much carbon dioxide. I am not joking. That's what they said. On July 29th, 2025, the US DOE issued a report that says, quote, the growing amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere directly influences the Earth's system by promoting plant growth, parents, global greening, in parents, whereby enhancing agricultural yields, thereby enhancing agricultural yields and neutralizing ocean alkalinity. I'm sorry. Increased carbon dioxide in the air is not promoting plant growth and thereby enhancing agricultural yields. It may promote plant growth in some places of some kinds, but it is not good for the droughts and the floods and the other things that we've been seeing destroying agricultural yields in the last few years. And the carbon dioxide is not neutralizing ocean alkalinity. It is making the ocean acid, which is not the same thing. If the ocean were alkaline, it would be neutralizing that, but it isn't. And what has happened here is the US DOE is adopting science, and I should put science in quotes here, what it calls science, that agrees with the politics involved. And we're going to get in deeper and deeper trouble if we allow that to continue. Okay, next item. We have a picture of St. Basil's Cathedral, which is at Red Square in Moscow. And we have an item from Euronews. The title is, Who's Fueling Climate Disinformation and Why? By the International Panel on Information Environment, a piece by the International Panel on Information and Environment identifies key actors in disinformation narratives. Its authors highlight several entities, primarily individuals associated with the oil industry, politicians and right-wing circles, as well as certain countries, notably Russia. And I will point out that before Russia invaded Ukraine, 67% of Russian foreign trade in terms of value was coming from its sale of fossil fuels. And honestly, I think the reason why that war started was because Russia thought that if it quickly took over Ukraine, which produces a lot of food, it would put a pinch on the European Union that would give it leverage to get the European Union to continue to use fossil fuels into the future. The problem was the Russians were looking at fossil fuels and seeing that there was not just a decline, but a scheduled decline that would continue for 5 or 7 or 10 years, which would leave it without sales in Europe. So it invaded Ukraine and lost most of its sales in Europe very quickly over the course of 2 years or so. This gave Russia a profoundly important incentive to fuel climate disinformation. The same thing is true of of the oil industry and politicians associated with Russia or fossil fuels. And that includes in the United States and a couple of other countries that are largely controlled by people who are involved in this. Okay, we have a picture of transporting jackets. And the jacket here, well, let me just read this. This is from Renews. First jackets depart for Deep Le Tréport. Sorry, my French is horrible, non-existent. The first 4 jacket foundations for Deep Le Tréport offshore wind farm were shipped from Navantia Seine-Ergues Fine Yard in Spain. Sorry about my Spanish. Each 1,200-ton structure, I can't see how many of them are on that ship, but each one weighs 1,200 tons, is part of the 72 jacket array in a consortium of Ocean Wind, Sumitomo Corporation, and Banque des Territoires. Now, this is something that I find kind of astonishing. During the Second World War, my father started the war on a destroyer mine layer, which had been a destroyer during the First World War, and it didn't weigh much more than one of those yellow jackets that's on the surface of that ship. I think there have got to be 4 jackets on that ship, which means 4,800 tons. 4,800 tons is a lot. That would be 4 of those destroyers riding on that one ship. We're getting bigger and bigger ships. We'll see other indications of those in time. But we're getting bigger and bigger ships that are installing bigger and bigger foundations for wind turbines and substations in offshore situations. It's just what's happening. Okay, our next item comes from Euronews also. We're up to Saturday, August 2nd, and we have a picture of St. Peter's Basilica, which is, of course, in the Vatican City. The title of this article is Vatican Strikes Solar Farm Deal to Become the World's First Carbon Neutral State. Italy agreed to a Vatican plan to turn a 430-hectare field north of Rome, 430 hectares is, I'm going to say, roughly 1,000 acres, once a source of controversy between the two, into a solar farm. The Holy See hopes it will generate enough electricity to meet its needs and turn Vatican City into the first carbon neutral state. I'm not surprised by the intention of this. I'm a little surprised that nobody's got a more advanced plan, but the Vatican is small enough that a solar system to provide all of its energy is not at all out of the realm of possibility. I would say we would expect that it would not just be solar power, it would probably also be batteries in order to maintain power while the sun is not shining or down. So this becomes more than just a bookkeeping exercise. Okay, we're up to a piece by MSNBC News, and here we have a picture of wind turbines. The title is On Clean Energy, Too Many Republicans Appear to Forget That Batteries Exist. When targeting solar and wind power, Donald Trump routinely repeats an old mistake, saying that after sundown or when the wind isn't blowing, those energy sources are nearly useless. He is not, however, the only Republican who has shown confusion about this. I hit this every day. Every day I come across, honestly, almost every day. I come across statements by various people who say you need baseload power, or we need nuclear power, or we need nuclear and gas, or something to that effect, because solar power is only produced while the sun is shining, and wind power is only produced while the wind is blowing. And they forget completely about energy storage. And this is particularly interesting to me because I was living in Winchester, New Hampshire, when the Vermont Yankee plant was built in about 1972, 1973, thereabouts. I was not living in Winchester. I had been living in Winchester while it was being built. A few years before it finished, I was living in Winchester. And at the same time Vermont Yankee was being built, down the river, not very many miles, Northfield Mountain was being built simultaneously. Northfield Mountain was pumped storage. Pumped storage is there to store electricity that is being produced during a time of electrical abundance, let's call it that, and then used when the demand is high. And the pumped storage, what it was doing was pumping from the Connecticut River to the top of Northfield Mountain, where it sat until the power was needed, at which time it was run back down to the Connecticut River. And at the time that was built, the turbines that moved that water up and then created electricity when it was coming back down again, those turbines were the biggest water turbines in the world, as I recall. Why did they put them there? Because Vermont Yankee, like all nuclear plants, needs backup. And the reason it needs backup is because it is baseload power. And baseload power doesn't provide all the electricity that's needed on the grid. It only provides the base load. Why it's called base load. And the base load is the lowest load that will appear on the grid during a period which, for the purpose of a power plant, is going to be its lifetime. So Vermont Yankee was built to have 500 and some odd megawatts, which turned into 620 later, because that was the lowest that they expected. Now, that's true of every baseload plant, which means that if the electricity demand is higher than the lowest that could be expected during a 40-year period or something, which it will be nearly all the time, that excess electricity has to come from somewhere other than a baseload plant, because baseload plants are inflexible. That's the reason they're built, because inflexible power plants produce the cheapest electricity available. Only they don't anymore. The cheapest electricity available comes from solar, wind, and batteries. Things have been flipped on their heads. So that's why a company like Lazard, which produces the levelized cost of energy material, is worth paying attention to. Solar with batteries, wind with batteries, firmed to the point where it is at least as reliable as nuclear, produces electricity that costs a quarter to a third of the cost of what comes from a nuclear power plant. Why would you need to build nuclear power plants? Okay, good question. Glad you asked it. Glad I asked it. Okay, we will go on. Here we have another article from Clean Technica. This is a picture of a Chevrolet Equinox EV, electric vehicle. This article is another one that comes after the earlier article, also from Clean Technica, because the person went looking for the cheapest EVs that were around. The title is "A New Chevy Equinox EV for $32,000?" question mark. Jake Richardson writes, after finding online information about a new Nissan Ariya for $31,000 before incentives, I wondered about the availability of other new EVs that are affordable. So in less than 5 minutes, I found a new Chevy Equinox EV LT for $32,000, also before incentives. This Jake Richardson, who writes regularly for Clean Technica, went around, I think every day for the last week. He has looked for cheap electric vehicles, and he's found them, a bunch of them, in the range of $30,000 to $33,000 without federal incentives, with local incentives. And the last thing that I read, which we're not going to deal with today, but it's worth talking about, is an electric vehicle that has a lease cost of $99 a month, which seems very cheap. And he was a little perplexed when he looked into that, because he found that the listed cost at the dealer was $99 online, but when you actually contacted the dealer, it got a little complicated. And a lot of it depended on having you can't drive more than 1,000 miles a month to have that price. If you do, then the price goes up. But the point is, these inexpensive electric vehicles are around. Now, we have a picture here. We're at Sunday, August 3rd, and we have a picture of a wind farm. That particular wind farm is in Queensland, I believe. And this article is from Renew Economy, which is an Australian publication, online publication. The title is "Queensland New Record Share of Wind and Solar, its first since anti-renewable LNP swept into power." LNP is the Liberal National Party of Queensland, and in Australia, the word liberal means about what the word conservative does in the United States. Queensland set a record for solar and wind and solar share, reaching 77.5% on Saturday. Queensland, by the way, is a big place. It is the first time the record has been broken since last October, and the first since the LNP government won the state election nearly a year ago. This reminds me, that the LNP and the Liberals in Australia and the National Party in Australia are kind of like places where Donald Trump would feel at home, I believe. But interestingly, the first of these to do this was after the Tesla 100 megawatt battery was installed in South Australia, with Liberals in power, and also a virtual power plant being assembled, at which point the Liberals, that was done with Labor in power. The Liberals came along and took over and said, we're going to shut that virtual power plant down. They didn't talk about the battery, because the battery was pretty successful. That was a battery that Elon Musk, seeing that there had been a bad storm in South Australia, told the South Australians, if you put in one of these batteries, I'm going to guarantee that it's going to be working within 100 days of the time the contract is signed, or you get it for free. Now, a 100 megawatt battery is not cheap. So they did an auction to find who could put in a battery of that size. Tesla won. On about day 99 after the contract was signed, there was a situation where the grid was in trouble, and that battery came online and kept the trouble from developing into something really bad. Australians are, I think, pretty much sold on batteries, and they're kind of, some of them are kind of anti-renewable, but they don't want to go through what we're going through in the United States today. Anyway, that was, it was interesting to see that Queensland set a record of 77.5% of its electricity from renewables. Next, we have a picture of the Earth. That's NASA's picture. And if you look at the top, you can see that this is done from an angle with Saudi Arabia and Northern Africa. And you can see very clearly that Antarctica is at the bottom of that picture. This is from ABC News. The title of the article is 2024 on track to become Earth's warmest year on record despite slight global temperature drop. For the first time in over a year, the planet did not set a monthly temperature record. That is to say, we set 11 of them in a row, but we didn't set a record in June. However, Earth did have its 2 warmest days on record globally in July. Sorry, I said June, I meant July. Also, it's becoming increasingly likely that 2024 will end up as the warmest year on record. Well, it did. It wound up being the warmest year on record. Berkeley Earth, and I should say, the places that I looked all said that 2024 was the warmest year on record, and 2023 was the second warmest. But if you listed the 10 warmest, I think all of them were in the last 12 years. Berkeley Earth said that the 10 hottest years on record were the 10 most recent years. I could be wrong about that, but it seems to me the 3 different places that I looked, Berkeley Earth said that, the other 2 did not. But we're getting warmer, no question about it. And we're getting warmer as the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is increasing. Carbon dioxide is not the only global warming gas, but it is increasing. Here we have an item from ABC News. And the picture is Source Global Hydro Panels. They look like solar panels. It's because they are solar panels. The thing is, they're not producing electricity. They produce water. Hydro panels can bring clean water to remote deserts. Nearly 30 years after the California desert town of Hinckley won a suit against PG&E over contaminated water, a company is installing new technology to give Hinckley clean water. The firm has set up hydro panels to create the water using a solar-powered system that draws in moisture. What they're doing is they're drawing in the air above the desert, and they're wringing the water out of it, and then returning the relatively water-free air back to the desert again. It works. It's not cheap water, though. And the article makes that clear. That article is in ABC News. Okay, our next item, we're up to Monday, August 4th. We have a picture of a wind farm and an item from Recharge News. The title is Why Trump's Renewable Surrender Could Hand China AI Victory. Some commentators believe Trump's pro-fossil fuels, anti-renewables policy, which is exemplified in his big, beautiful bill, is already surrendered, has already surrendered a giant advantage to China in a crucial area, access to vast amounts of energy needed to power AI data centers. Yes, China is already installing more renewable energy than the rest of the world put together. That's not a joke. That's a statement I've read multiple times in the news. China is producing more than half of the solar and wind infrastructure that is installed worldwide, and China is able to support artificial intelligence using renewables. Now, whether nuclear power can support artificial intelligence, I don't know. I suspect it never will. And the reason is because the cost of nuclear power goes up while the cost of renewable energy goes down. And that is the way it has been for many years. Anyway, I'm going to get back from that to this picture, which is, let's see. This is a picture of Arcadis Ost 1. This article is from Renews. JERA and BP launched 13 gigawatt offshore wind JV. JV, of course, is joint venture. So JERA, I should pronounce it because I believe that's a German name and the J would be pronounced like an I. JERA and BP are operating to produce a 13 gigawatt offshore wind portfolio. That's about the equivalent of 6 large nuclear power plants. Offshore wind has got a high capacity factor, sometimes in excess of 50%, where nuclear power has got the highest capacity factor, worldwide at almost 90%. But 13 gigawatts of offshore wind power is a bunch of nuclear power plants, and they're putting this together. Let me please read the synopsis. JERA and BP completed the formation of JERA Next BP, a 50-50 offshore wind joint venture with a portfolio for 13 gigawatts of net potential capacity. The portfolio includes 1 gigawatt of operating assets, such as the 257 megawatt Arcadis Ost 1 in Germany, which is what you're seeing in the picture. That is the installation of a blade on a wind turbine in that site. 7.5 gigawatts in development and 4.5 of secured leases. Renewable energy is being installed worldwide, except in the United States, where the Trump administration is trying to stop it as quickly as it possibly can. Putting the United States behind China, by the way, as we just said. Okay, next item. These are Greenalia wind turbines. CJEU, I'll explain that in a minute, backs Galicia. I'm not going to pronounce that Galicia just because a Spanish emperor had a lisp. Wind permitting process. The CJEU, Court of Justice of the European Union, is what CJEU is, upheld the legality of procedures used in Galicia to authorize wind farms, removing a legal hurdle that had installed almost 100 projects in the region. 100 projects were stalled. The Wind Energy Business Association said the decision ends years of legal uncertainty. This is from Renews. And by the way, the reason I won't pronounce that Galicia is because my mind is incapable of maintaining that as a fact that I have to maintain as I go forward. So some things I ignore. And if I forget your name, it's not because I don't like you, It's just that I don't remember names well. Okay. We're up to Tuesday, August 5th, and we have this. This is amazing. This is an item from Renews. This is Sleipnir, which is the name of that craft, which is a semi-submersible installation a vessel. Inch Cape installs offshore substation. The offshore jacket foundation and substation for the 1.1 gigawatt Inch Cape offshore wind farm has been installed, jacket foundation and substation. Two of them have been installed. That is one foundation, one substation. So that makes it a plural. Have been installed in the North Sea. The Siemens Energy Offshore Transformer Module and its jacket foundation were lifted into place by Hirema Marine Contractors crane vessel Sleipnir. Now, I'm pausing on the Sleipnir because it has two cranes, and those cranes are capable of lifting 10,000 metric tons each. So that vessel is capable of lifting 20,000 metric tons. And it's hard to imagine 20,000 metric tons. I tried putting together the number of tractor trailers holding 5,000 gallons of water and how much each tractor trailer would weigh and how many of those would be 20,000 metric tons, which, by the way, is 22,000 short tons, the tons that we're accustomed to. And I came up with a number in the hundreds, and I just said, people can't even envision that. You know, I used a destroyer as a weight metric earlier in this show, and this thing would pick up a heavy cruiser with lots of room to spare. That's heavy cruiser from the Second World War. So this is a gigantic vessel that has a lot of potential for a lot of use. This and that 20,000 metric ton evaluation is something that I found at the company's website. So I think it's probably correct. Okay. Next, I have a picture of a plastic spoon and an item. The article is from MSN, which is, I think, Microsoft Network. The title here is Plastic Causing Disease and Death from Infancy to Old Age. Now, this particular item appeared in a whole bunch of news articles. I have no idea, but I think at least 15 or 20 of them that I came across. Plastic pollution is a, quote, grave, growing, and under-recognized danger, end quote, to health that costs the world at least 1.5 trillion, with a T, dollars per year, according to a report in the Lancet Medical Journal. Now, the Lancet has a status that's similar to the Journal of the American Medical Association or the New England Journal of Medicine, but the Lancet is a UK publication. The report was published one day ahead of fresh talks in Geneva, aiming for the first treaty on plastic pollution. Again, this is not a joke, and there's a reason why I chose that picture, which was a picture from the way I've got that noted, I think it probably came from Wikimedia Commons, but I haven't got that noted properly so that I can tell looking at this photograph. Anyway, one of the articles that I came across, in fact, I think more than one of them, noted that microplastics exist throughout the body of almost everyone in the world. People eat microplastics, they drink microplastics in their water, they breathe microplastics in the air they breathe, and these microplastics get everywhere. One place they get is into human brains. And one of the things that I read, and I find it unbelievable, but I thought I'd put this spoon up just because it is something that I read. So it's a point of discussion. I don't want to call it a fact. One thing that I read is that the average human brain, adult human brain, has an amount of plastic microparticles in it that has a weight approximately equal to the weight of a plastic spoon. So you look at that, and that's about the amount of plastics that people have in their heads, in their brains. Now, I'm going to go on. That's too depressing to deal with. But hopefully we're going to have some sort of treaty out of that. We have a picture of an electric car from Hyundai Motor Group, and an article from Clean Technica. Let me put up the picture. Global EV sales, plug-in vehicles reach 28% share! Exclamation point. Global plug-in vehicles registrations were up 22% in June 2025 compared to June 2024. There were over 1.8 million registrations in June. Battery EVs grew 24% year over year to reach 1.1 million units, compared to plug-in hybrids growing 18% to about 600,000 units in the same period. Now, there's an issue here that I want to mention. I came across an article about a week ago that said that the point at which the turning point in which electric vehicles are really taking over the marketplace and gas-powered vehicles are in decline. That point is not 50% electric vehicles going into the market. It's not 50% of the market new sales versus 50%. It's 30%. And the reason is because the 30% is matched against retirements of old vehicles that are almost all gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. And so we're seeing new electric vehicles entering the market, along with a somewhat larger number of fossil fuel powered vehicles, but all of the vehicles, or almost all, being retired are fossil fuel. And the result of that is that the global sales of electric vehicles is going up and the global sales of fossil fueled vehicles is going down. Now, having seen the numbers, I can tell you that is exactly what's happening. It's 28%, not 30%, but the numbers for electric vehicles keep going up, despite the claims that sometimes appear in the press. The numbers for gasoline-powered and diesel-powered vehicles are going down, declining, not rapidly, but they are in decline already. And I'm seeing that already. And I think by this time next year, we're going to be seeing it noticeably on the road. I might be mistaken by that. It might be 2 years, but change is coming. And when it comes, it's going to be a big deal. So we're up to Wednesday, August 6th, and we have a picture of a solar array. This is Port Augusta Renewable Energy Park, which is in Australia. This article is from Renew Economy, which is an Australian publication. The title is Wind and Solar Droughts Have More Impact on Prices Than Reliability. Long-duration droughts of variable energy, renewable energy, are really neither that long nor that severe. Nevertheless, electricity spot prices are very elastic, and fewer than 0.5% of days have wind and solar output below 66% of normal for 4 days or longer in a row. Okay, that's a somewhat roundabout way of saying that the reliability issue from wind and solar, according to studies that people have done, is not as important as the price variation that can happen at the same time. Now, I want to say, by the way, price variation has always been with us. And one of the things that I remember from very early on when I did this show was a headline that said the price of electricity per kilowatt hour, per megawatt hour, had jumped from, I'm going to say, $65 or $75 per megawatt hour to $12,500 per megawatt hour in the course of 5 minutes. That was in Australia, which, by the way, means a great deal, because $12,500 turns out to be only about $9,000 US, because the Australian dollar is lower value. Nevertheless, what happened was a coal-burning power plant tripped. So all of a sudden, the electricity from a coal-burning power plant disappeared from the grid. And when that happened, there was a big decline in available power and a big increase in cost. The increase in cost lasted for a few minutes, 20 minutes or something, and then it declined. So that an hour later, it was no longer $12,500, it was $2,000, still too much money. And the next day it had returned to normal because other power resources had come into play. But that kind of thing happens. It happens with renewable energy too. And so what? Okay. We have an item from Clean Technica. This is a picture of a BYD B12 bus. And the title of this article is BYD Electric Bus Sales Grow 128.5%. Now, I want to point out, it says it grew by 128.5%, not that it grew to 128.5%. This is growing to 228.5% of what it had been at the start. That's big growth. We should take a look at the stunning growth coming from BYD's commercial vehicle divisions. In July, BYD is a Chinese company based in Shenzhen, by the way. Shenzhen is practically next to Hong Kong. In July, BYD's fully electric bus sales rose 128.5% year over year from 267 in July 2024 to 610 in July 2025. Other commercial vehicle sales rose from 776 in July 2023 to 1,317 in July 2024 and 2,656 in July 2025. Obviously, what's happening is we're seeing a lot of growth from BYD. Similar growth is not happening in the United States. And I think a lot of that is because BYD is in a country that is pushing for growth in this industry so that it can export these things to other parts of the world in order to have trade income. The United States, we're not doing that. And so the result is we're getting trounced by China, which we have been for years, by the way. This is not something with the new administration exclusively. It's something that's been going on for a long time. Now we're up to our last item, which we have a picture of a wind farm. I see this picture every once in a while. I think we've actually used it at least once before, but I try not to reuse things too much. This particular article is from Renews, and its title is Germany Urges EU to Cut China Magnet Reliance. Now, the synopsis is, at this time, over 90% of permanent magnets containing rare earth elements are produced in China. They are vital components for wind turbine generators and a lot of other things too. The German wind industry proposed that Europe target sourcing 30% of all permanent magnets from suppliers outside China by 2030. Well, we could build a factory because there's a lot of rare earth elements in a lot of places around the world. There was a time not that long ago when the United States had the biggest rare earths mine in the world, but it got closed down. It could be reopened with environmental protections built into it. But the problem is you've got to have factories that can do the separation. There's 17 rare earth elements, and they are all very nearly chemically identical. So it's really hard to separate them chemically. And we could build factories that would do that. It's kind of unclear whether the Europeans would be willing to buy anything from the United States at this point because of the treatment that they've got in terms of tariffs. But, you know, China is not doing that to them, so maybe they would stick with China, despite what the Germans say. More to the point, more likely is that the Europeans would build their own factories, not buy from China, not buy from the United States, but make their own. And I think there's a certain amount of sense in that. So we're up to the end of the show. What I will wish you is that you have a highly amusing week. Whoops. Sorry. I will wave goodbye. Next week, I believe Nancy will probably be here. She's gone to Montpelier for the day because of work, but she'll have, hopefully not have problems getting to the show next week. And so you can listen to somebody who's more interesting than I am. Come back and I'll try to be here for you. Bye-bye.